welcome to another amazing episode of Say It Online, where we help digital agency owners stop just randomly shouting into the void and start communicating meaningfully and effectively in this digital age. I'm your host, Say Gabriel, and this episode was brought to you by our sponsor, Nancy Content. If you're sick of conversion content being a huge pain in your agency's butt, especially websites, campaigns, etc., let's talk. With the smoothest content process ever, a team of unbelievably skilled and organized content strategists, and years of subcontracting experience, Anansi is looking to make your life as a digital agency owner unbelievably easier. Just head, if you're interested, to anansicontent.com, that's ANANSI content.com, and hit Let's Talk. And now, without further ado, here's our episode.
All right, so I am here with Celene again for part 2 on our series on growth strategy. So I'm super excited today. We're going to be continuing the train of talking about what a growth strategy is, how it's applicable to your business. So last week, if you tuned in, we were talking about the difference between foundation versus growth strategy and what that means, how both can apply to your business, maybe which you're offering right now, how to determine that, and opportunities to potentially start to include growth strategy if you don't already. This week, we are going to be talking about the components, the basic components that make up a growth strategy. So basically what it is in practical terms. So welcome, Celene. I'm excited to talk about this with you today.
I'm so excited too. And it's funny because even though I already know so much about growth strategy, every time we do one of these episodes, you go into so much detail that I learn stuff too. So I'm just excited to show up and learn. And also chat with you.
Excellent. Well, are you ready to interview me about this? And,
yes, I'm so excited. Hopefully I get a passing grade. I'm not used to this. I know, I'm not worried. So I guess just to start us off, because I know last time, like you mentioned, we talked about growth strategy versus foundation strategy. Now we're kind of diving right into growth strategy. So just at a high level, can you tell me a little bit more about how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. So last week we talked about the fact that a foundation strategy is, for example, like your brand or your messaging anchors, which we produce messaging guidelines, because it's something that although it does change over time, it's kind of like, it is a foundation, right? Like it is, we call it a foundation strategy because it's something you need to have established before you can really grow so that you understand what makes you unique, what makes you memorable, who it is that you serve, and so that there's a place that the people that you serve can at the very least find out about you and what you do. So growth strategy is the next step after that. And even if you do a really, really quick and dirty style foundation, right, you still want to have something there. But growth strategy, rather than being something that is kind of solid and, maybe you revise it once a year or something like that, growth strategy is really cyclical. Now, the cycles that you can use to kind of leverage it and grow with it can range from weekly all the way up to quarterly, depending how mature your growth strategy is. But basically what it is at a high level is, and there can be many different names for this. We're trying to use kind of the most general names possible, what we use inside Anansi as well. But you might call this something different. It is a means of focusing your available resources and options for growth, using the techniques of rapid iteration and tracking success metrics to make new decisions based on that information and metrics that will help you achieve your business goals. So that was a bit of a mouthful. For most of our listeners, if you're offering something like this, it probably looks like some sort of either marketing retainer or marketing ongoing consulting or service, right? So this isn't like a web care package type thing where you're maintaining something that was already produced. This is a strategic and cyclical process where basically you are observing and looking at and deciding on a strategy to help you achieve your goals, executing on it, tracking how it's doing, and then making new decisions either to continue forward or maybe to shift or pivot in some ways. So obviously there's a lot of different ways to do this, depending on what service you're giving, depending where your specialty is. But there are certain components that do unite it every time, and that's what we're going to be getting into today. But this is something that can be applied no matter what service you are giving, as long as it is strategic and tied to growth. So tied to one of a few different specific goals and means of achieving them. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense.
Excellent.
Yeah. So I guess let's dig into that. So now at a high level, we kind of know like very loosely like how it works and what the goal is. So now we're going to talk through the individual, like the high level components of it, because there's quite a few components to a growth strategy. And it on the surface, like when I first heard it, I'm like, that's a lot. But once you realize how they all work together, it's actually super simple, which is super cool.
Yes.
So I guess.
Go. Sorry. Was that a question? I'm not sure. Please continue.
I was just going to say, so, like what are these high level components?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm going to say, as Celene said, this can feel like a lot when you're just talking about these components on their own. So as we mentioned last week, we really want you to thrive at this. We think this is really, really critical, whether it's for your own business, whether it's for a client, or whether this is something you want to offer, something that you're already offering and want to improve. So we are actually going to include all of our resources for this on the episode page. So I'm going to talk you through them. If you happen to be near a device and, not doing the dishes or like running or cycling, which is what I often listen to podcasts doing, you can feel free to even open that up and follow along and take a look and see how these kind of fit together. But if you aren't, don't worry, because we're going to share all of this with you, the exact processes we use on our own business as well as with our own partners and clients. So this is not theory. This is something we actually do. And we're going to share everything we can for you to be successful with this, either with your own business or doing it with clients. And next episode, we're also going to break down the process for implementing this. So today we're just talking about the components, how they fit together, etc. But definitely tune in next week if you're actually interested in doing this and applying this, because we are going to get down into how to make this all work. And as Celene said, it's surprisingly simple. The biggest challenge around this was harnessing these components into a form that was simple and straightforward. And that's definitely where I hear and see a lot of agencies struggling and falling behind, is kind of how to make this cohesive and process driven when there's so many options out there for growth. So especially even just in the digital marketing world, there's like infinite options, right? So that's really, I think, what sets this process apart and what makes it unique is how clear and simple we've been able to make this. So definitely if you're hearing these components and thinking, oh my God, I could put something together right now, or, oh, maybe I'm already doing some of this, but maybe I'd like to add one, great. But if you're just having like confused face question marks over your head, don't worry, we've got your back. Okay, so that was kind of roundabout. Sorry, Celene. What was the question? It was, you wanted me to list out the components?
Yeah, I mean, you can it's whatever your expertise thinks is best, but you can either, kind of list out the high level components and then kind of go into detail, or you can go into a little bit of detail as you talk about, like, basically my question is, what makes up a growth strategy?
Okay, so I'll start by just talking high level about what things are essential and what things are optional, and then maybe we can get into what those components mean.
Sure.
Awesome. So the number one thing that you are going to need is you're going to need a high level goal. So this is something where you're going to have to make goals at a few different levels. But first of all, you need to understand what the whole focus of your growth strategy is for the moment, because there's a lot of different aspects that are part of, a buyer journey or a sales funnel or, whatever you like to call it, however you like to approach it. But you're going to need to understand a high level goal to make sure everybody is going in the same direction. So I'll get more into that later. We have a simplified means of determining this. Now, the next thing you're going to need is kind of the lower level means of setting and tracking goals. And this, in my opinion, will be 100 times more impactful if it is data driven. So we determine, we say this could be as simple as a scorecard a la Traction. If you've read the book Traction by Dino Wickman, I believe it is, we're huge fans of this now. But it could be very much more specific. It could be a program dashboard where you're like pulling different data from different sources, or it could literally just be an Excel sheet. where you're tracking a few things. We, in fact, for a lot of projects, we keep it all within a document because we believe tracking fewer metrics more closely is more effective than having a number for everything and not understanding it. But like I said, you do want to be tracking metrics of some kind, and we'll get into that, of course, a little bit later. The next thing that you want, and this is the part that is still really evolving for us, is a priority and action tracker with deadlines. So basically what I have found the most effective way of creating a growth strategy is making sure that everything is in line and flowing down from your single high-level goal. And if you can do that, really big businesses, maybe you want to set 2 high-level goals, but considering that you're probably going to have a few lower-level goals to support those high-level goals, it's really easy to get in over your head trying to do too many things and not making traction with any of them. So when we get to the, priority and action tracker section, I think this is really critical because this is showing you how things are fitting into your high-level goal, who is doing it, and when it's supposed to be done by. Basically, what's the next action that's going to happen? And then, of course, what comes after that is some sort of issues list. So as you're going through the priorities and actions and talking with your client or with your team or with yourself, you're definitely going to come across some challenges. You want a place to just dump all of those so you can prioritize them and look at them later. An overall timeline, so kind of bird's eye view of what is happening when, so you can see if something being pushed out or pushed off is going to negatively affect or positively affect longer term timelines. And then my personal favorite is an idea wish list. So it is exactly what it sounds. So a place to put all of the million ideas you or your clients come up with. Great. This is kind of what ends up being your menu of actions to take to support your strategy. Those are kind of the key components. So goal, metrics, priority and action tracker, issues list, timeline, an idea wish list being the main things. And then a few optional kind of things that can really, I think, help you out or spice things up are a finished actions list, some sort of process to determine a buyer journey or a value journey, and then a marketing engine, which is a concept that was coined by a program that I was a part of and a former mentor of mine, Brent Weaver and You Gurus. Anyway, we do reference them with regularity, but they have this concept called a marketing engine that I think is really powerful. So yeah, like I said, it kind of sounds like a lot, but they all come together, I promise.
I have to say, out of all the components, my very, very, very favorite thing that I love about this is the wish list. Because I know with so many projects, the client's like, oh, and I want to do this. Oh, and by the way, I got a great idea for an ebook I'm going to write. And I want to, shiny object. And look, there's a squirrel. And they have all these ideas, but the client always wants to do all of them right away. And this is like the best way to crawl them because you're validating their ideas. You're like, perfect, this is awesome. Let's put this on the wish list. And then, like you said, it's a menu you can get to later, but it's also a way to keep the focus on the things you're already doing without the client feeling like they're being ignored or like all the ideas that they want aren't going to get done.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And as you know, Celene, in the past few months, as one of our strategists, Jazz, has risen to become the official chief of marketing, I guess it's been a little while now, I myself, right, who over the past few years, I've, evolved from doing literally everything to, having my finger in every pie to, having other people who are in charge and I'm supporting them is kind of how the dynamic has shifted or what we're working to very strongly support as a dynamic. And so I often kind of get to be the client in my own business around this. And I really, really appreciate the idea wish list, both as, a strategist in my own right and as a client, because even just looking at it, I have to admit that I sometimes feel tempted to like pull Jazz or pull the whole team in a totally different direction. And putting things on the wish list creates a little bit of space in between me wanting to do something and us deciding to do it, which I think is good for the team because that space creates clarity for me as much as anybody. But also, I can see just how many things are on the wish list. And when you're coming up with the idea, I think that it's easy to kind of be in a bit of a silo, especially if you have a service provider who's doing a lot of the work for you, and to forget just how much time and energy it takes to execute things and how, there's a finite amount of time and energy. So I find just opening up the wish list and seeing how many things on it kind of keeps me in check a little bit, where I'm like, okay, cool. I still feel safe adding this, but I'm not tempted to be like, oh yeah, we're definitely going to start doing this next week. Cause I'm like, right. This is joining the 25 other ideas I've had this week.
Yeah. And it's hard. I'm guilty of this and you're guilty of this, and especially you, because you're always full of amazing ideas. But when when that new idea is just being born in your head and you're fleshing it out and you're getting so excited, it seems like the most exciting, most important thing in the world. But when you have an objective list that you have to prioritize, and you can be like, oh, this is actually way more relevant and is going to get our business where we want it to faster. As excited as I am about this idea, it's like a next quarter idea. Or next year idea.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It is hard, but it's useful. And I would argue that the process of forcing you to focus and move in fewer directions with greater momentum is exactly what makes the growth strategy so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say this as well, if you're thinking about this or you're already implementing it, or especially if you're training other people to implement it, I think that a really important thing to remember with the growth strategy is that it leans a lot more, an effective growth strategy leans a lot more on your expertise. As a service provider, as a specialist. Mm-hmm. What makes the growth strategy powerful is that it forces you to focus and gives you the tools to help your client focus. But the strategy element really comes from you. And I think that all of us, have our fields of expertise in this, and we probably know more than we think we do. But it also, if this is something, you're interested in implementing a growth strategy and marketing, or a corner of marketing, because marketing, digital marketing in particular, is such a huge, huge, huge umbrella, isn't really your specialty, like growth marketing, it creates a focus for you to learn what you need to learn as well. Instead of just being like, woo, I'm going to learn marketing, and you Google how to learn digital marketing or something like that. Hopefully this is not how you go about learning marketing, but you're like, holy cow, yeah, how to market. Hopefully you haven't just sold a project. Now you're Googling how to market. Those are not usually our audience members. Usually the people that we work with the most and serve and our listeners tend to be people who are more mature in their businesses. Either you're looking to scale, you're a successful solopreneur, or most common, you already have a team of some kind, and are quite often just trying to stay on top of the chaos. So yeah, anyway, I'm rambling a little bit, but this is just super powerful. I'm just really excited.
Yeah. And it's so true about what you said about setting you up as an expert, because so often with clients, no matter how much of an expert that we are in our own domains, clients think they know best. That happens to our strategists, where they just get treated like basic copywriters, where the client's like, oh no, XYZ is way better. And you're like, oh, that's awful. Or even in web design or something, you end up being the order taker, where the client's dictating every little detail of the website, even if they're not best practices. And the growth strategy definitely helps instill that mindset and that expectation early on that, you're the one steering the ship, not the client.
Yeah, absolutely. I really think it gives people a chance to shine. And once again, we have a growth strategy process we're willing to offer it to you, but we're not just speaking about our process. If you have an effective growth strategy that covers these elements and is gaining people results and success, I think that applies to that. This applies to you as well, and hopefully this will help you tile it in even better.
Yeah.
Or manage people a little bit better sometimes, I think is the challenge I hear.
So maybe let's dig a little bit in to more of some of these components at a deeper level. Because I know we started off talking about that high level goal, but how does somebody actually determine what high level goal they should set? Because, that's the big thing. That's the North Star that we're following, or the North, or the compass north, or whatever, that's the thing we're following. So how do we know that we're setting it effectively? How do we go about that?
Yeah. So there are a million different potential goals that someone could set. But What we've found in years of working in digital marketing is that the same things tend to come up again and again and again and again. And so what we've found is that in a lot of situations, careful constraints move you further faster. So, what we tend to do with our clients is rather than just asking them, okay, what's your goal? We do like to ask questions around, like, where do you see your business in a year? What sort of marketing stuff are you working on? What's been successful for you? What hasn't been? What do you love? What makes you frustrated? I think these are all relevant things to kind of understand to help you guide your client in setting an effective goal. But we really simplify it into 5 different options. And a few of these could be split into, 2 more, but I think 5 is a nice number in the sense that most people can consider those 5 options in their head and understand the difference between them, even if they're a lay person when it comes to marketing. So the 5 goals we look at are visibility, engagement, conversion, upselling and retention, and loyalty and referrals. So I'll dig into those just a little bit more. So visibility is new eyes on your thing. We consider a visibility event has been successful when a new person is able to understand who you are and what you offer and who you serve and what problem you solve. Simply put, who you are and what problem you solve for who. So this is limited to new eyes on your thing, right? Like once you're starting to have the same eyes look at something over and over again, that's what we consider engagement. So if you need to generate leads in your business and your client is just talking about leads, often that is a visibility issue, right? And again, we can talk about ways to nurture visibility, but we want to keep it. We want to keep this episode on time, so I won't go into that too deeply. I am in the middle of working on actually a video series breaking down what each of these goals are and what some popular kind of things you can do to achieve these goals or strategies or priorities. But visibility is new eyes on your thing. Engagement is more interaction with your thing that doesn't result in a commitment. So this is listening to episodes. If you are listening to this episode right now, you are participating in an engagement event with us at Anansi because we're not asking you for anything to listen to this episode, but you are engaging with it. More engagement, more clicks, more listens, more reads, more time spent on page, etc. Now, conversion. And I'm sorry if this is a review for some of you. Maybe you already work with these goals, but I do think it's worthwhile that just these simple things can be so powerful, right? So conversion is a commitment of time or money. So this could be a conversion in the sense of somebody maybe getting a qualification call or somebody, buying a tripwire. Try not to get too jargony, but like buying a small thing from you guys. Or it could be somebody, subscribing to something. They are giving you something. They are making a commitment of some kind, a commitment of time. Maybe they're giving up their email. Depending who you follow in terms of kind of influencers and learning in the marketing field, most of them actually have way more than 5 steps. But I've just found that even if internally you are dealing with a full like Ryan Deiss's value journey or something like that, it's quite worthwhile to simplify it for your clients. You're not overwhelming them. So then we get to upselling or retention, right? So upselling or retention is pretty self-explanatory. It is taking somebody who has already purchased something, already committed money in some way, possibly time, but usually we're talking money at this point. And you are nurturing them again so that either they want to stick with you and spend more, or they potentially want to invest in something that is a little bit pricier, a little bit bigger. Often this can look like maybe they purchase a little thing, like a template or something that you're sharing. And then maybe you upsell them into a deeper engagement or something. So once again, many ways to do this, both in the digital world and in terms of direct. But this is one common goal. And then last but not least is loyalty or referral. So loyalty, retention, those things can get a little bit fuzzy. But What we mean here is that people are such raving fans that they are going out and telling other people about your thing. They're not just giving you more time or money or love or etc. They are actually going out and advocating for you to other people. So I think a lot of the time people just get stoked on the fact that they're getting referrals or something like this, and they forget that you can strategize around this. But this can be very, very, very powerful. Anyway, so 5 goals: visibility, engagement, conversion, upselling and retention, and loyalty and referrals. And if you specialize in an area of that, an area where some of those don't apply, then don't offer them as goals, right? You can be like, if somebody has that or you think that would be a good goal for them, refer them to someone else. Because you will do best if you are going, I think, deep, not wide in these goals, and with a growth strategy in general.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm so excited about every step of these. I'm like, I want to dig into them now, but let's do a separate episode on it. Because I keep wanting to ask you more questions. And I'm like, nope, we don't have time to talk in depth about each one of these. Because I know each one we could easily spend an hour on.
Yeah.
So instead, maybe let's talk a little bit more. I know you mentioned that it's really important to set, gather, and track metrics. So I know we talk a lot internally about leading and lagging indicators. How does somebody even know what metrics to track to see if they're being effective?
Okay, so when we're talking about setting, gathering, tracking metrics, this is why the goal is so important, because it's really easy to start taking action in a whole bunch of different directions. But if you consider an effective marketing process or an effective marketing funnel or whatever term you want to use, it's really like a hose. Maybe a hose that's wrapped in a lot of loops and with a lot of kinks in it. And what you really need to do is eliminate those kinks at each of those different levels until you're getting the flow that you need. And then you can simply turn up the water. But if you're turning up the water and there's a million kinks in your hose, then you're not going to get the flow you want no matter how much you turn up the water, or you're going to be radically wasting resources. Maybe in an extreme situation, something explodes. I don't know. But basically, it's really easy to go in a bunch of different directions, but it's really important that you work on having at least one hose that flows super, super well. And there are tools and processes you can do to kind of plot out your marketing journey from beginning to end, like the marketing engine process we talked about. We'll dig into that a different time. But the importance of setting a goal is that it guides which metrics you are going to choose. In the sense that, if we're talking about a visibility goal, and that is the first thing you're working on. And like I said, I really strongly suggest picking one goal, gaining traction in a means, gaining traction on that goal, and then picking a different goal and doing it in a serial way rather than trying to increase visibility, engagement, conversion all at the same time. Very tempting, very overwhelming. Now, when we first had Jazz kind of take on leadership in the marketing role, this exact thing happened. And, it happened to me when I was doing it. It's just super easy to do, which is that she was so excited that she started moving in a whole bunch of different directions, being like, okay, we're going to work on this, we're going to work on this, we're going to work on this. And once we clarified it by putting it through the growth strategy process, and saying, okay, we've been working on all these different things. Let's clarify it through these, this process and system that we've been working on. It became very, very clear which things were due now and which things were due later according to the goal that we had set. Right? So once again, if you're looking at visibility is your main goal, we were considering putting into place some tripwires, which are basically like a small value-driven offering you're giving at a super affordable price that helps people engage and see the value in what you do. And anyway, that's different marketing theory. But when we looked at it, even though we had a lot of the work prepared, etc., we were working on a visibility goal. So even though it was painful, we were like, okay, we're actually going to table this for now because we have too much stuff on the go. We need to focus and harness the resources we have to move in a single direction, or work on two projects that are both moving in a similar direction, maybe, instead of picking that. So even though something can be a very good idea, your goal is what helps you focus in on whether now is the time, basically. So with that in mind, I do want to touch a little bit more on your question, like how do you set metrics? How do you gather metrics? How do you track metrics? So hopefully, our listeners are fairly digitally savvy. Hopefully, even if you're just building websites, you're at the very least putting Google Analytics on every single site you build. If you're not, start doing that right now. Because that's what lets you track so much, right? It lets you track how effective your work is. It lets you track whether you're getting more visitors. Anyway, I know Google Analytics is really overwhelming, or it can be in terms of the data that it gives you, but at least that data will be there when you decide to harness it. Other popular sets of metrics that you can use are email marketing metrics, right? Like clicks, opens, etc. Podcast, right? Like listens, click-throughs on the emails we're sending out to our list, listens via platform. Let me tell you, metrics, you are way more likely to have too many than too few once you start digging into them, but they don't have to be so complicated. Now, if you're already doing email marketing, if you're driving traffic towards a landing page or a website, then yes, absolutely, leverage the metrics that will help you track those things and how effective they are. But it is far, far more valuable to have fewer metrics that are actually relevant and understandable and that you can explain than to have a million different metrics that are just numbers and therefore gobbledygook. So I recommend having it'll be whatever makes sense for you, but often no more than 2 or 3 metrics per goal. Certainly no more than 2 or 3 metrics per priority, right? One high level goal, and then each priority will kind of be like a mini goal. But I will say that you can go as simple with metrics as number of articles written or published. Like authority articles, I always come back to it because I think they're really low-hanging fruit that not a lot of people take advantage of. Basically writing articles for existing content publishers to establish yourself as an expert for your niche or your audience. It could be 3 authority articles published in a quarter. That could be your single metric that you're tracking, which then, might have metrics like how many are drafted or how many people you've reached out to or what kind of list you've made. But it doesn't have to be, intense email marketing or Google Analytics. It just has to be relevant.
Cool. Thank you for going into so much detail with that. Because now I'm like, okay, I have like specific ideas of what type of metrics I could track, where to find them. Everything I need is perfect. So I guess kind of the next component is that priority and action tracker that you mentioned. So how do we set that up? Like, what does that need to have?
Okay, so I actually like to incorporate this, if possible, with metrics. Again, if you look at the template that we're sharing, you can see how we put this together, although we also have a link for a more kind of complex or in-depth scorecard style there. But really what you need is you need to cover the who, the what, and the when for the action tracker. And for the priority, you need to cover what the priority is, what the metric is, and what the status of that metric is. So what I mean by that is if you have your high-level goal, you need to talk about what are the priorities that are going to contribute to the goal. So for example, if your high-level goal is quite simply more visibility, the priority is where you're going to put in the SMART version of the strategy that you're using, the goal, the strategy that you're using. I use the acronym SMART. I think most people are familiar with it, where it's specific, measurable. I'm not remembering all the different letters in order, but it's actionable and timely, achievable. Sorry,
realistic.
Realistic, achievable.
Remember we Googled it last time.
I know. So basically, I'll give an example. I'm just going to use our own as an example. Like I said, we're giving you the goods here. So if a primary growth goal is more visibility, then for example, a current priority, we have one current priority, which is having me share expertise on a minimum of 3 influencer platforms. And we have another priority, which is increasing the new listens on our podcast by X amount by the end of X time. We tend to work on a quarterly cycle. So, our deadlines tend to be end of quarter. But that might vary for you. If you're working with a client, in our client projects, we often set different deadlines. Often, of course, because we're working with ourselves, we have much more resources at our disposal as well because we have for strategists and writers and et cetera. So, we maybe are choosing more priorities for ourselves. But quite often, again, with a client, like I would start, if they have a limited amount of resources to spend, start with one priority, maybe two. Right? Maybe 2 or 3 goals or metrics specifically within that priority. So working down. So all of this should be in alignment, right? So if we have an overall goal of more visibility and current priority of getting me, say, to share expertise on a minimum of 3 influencer platforms, then a metric for us at the beginning of that process might be determine list of 10 content publishers to write an authority article for. Or it might be determine a list of 10 podcasts to reach out to and see if they're looking for guests, right? And then that ultimate, or rather maybe the ultimate metric might be get, say, booked on 6 podcasts. And then the next action there might be to determine the list and kind of move forward. So once again, I just want to cover what those elements are. So priority metric status, right? So what the priority is, what you're trying to do. So I like to make these as specific and measurable as possible every time. And then what is the metric that's going to allow you to measure that, right? So get, say, to share expertise on a certain amount of platforms trickles down to get, say, booked on X amount of podcasts, which then may start with making a list of podcasts. And then maybe the next action after that will be to reach out to 3 a day or something like that. The next thing that you're going to want to include is a status. So I love to color code this. This is for your client or your superior's benefit. So if you're just doing this for your business, I think it's great to have because it shows you where you need to address your attention more. But this is really a visual cue that helps your client see, who may not understand the technical, all the different actions that need to go on and how they affect things and et cetera. That just shows it's either on track, it's falling behind, or it's off track. If something's off track, that means that a good chunk of whatever meeting you're using to track this should be spent issue and problem solving over this. Now, the last 3 things I said are just who, what, and when. So we like to have a next action, responsible human, and when the next action due date is, and that just tracks and makes sure that things are moving forward. Also great to include notes of some kind. Once again, we have a template that you can use for this. But those are the basic components if you're putting this together for yourself or if maybe you're trying to troubleshoot your own process. The key thing here is that everything is in alignment with the top goal so that you can check and see, okay, this is going to move us towards where we want to go and we are making progress on it regularly.
Wow, your examples are so realistic and vivid. It's almost like they're real examples pulled from our own strategy. Which is perfect. But let's talk about the issues list, because I know like a lot of people when you hear the word issues, you're like, ooh, like let's shrink away from that. But this is actually, I mean, I haven't personally gone through it a lot in our growth strategy process yet, but I know in our other meetings, like the issues list is actually like the most important part of any meetings that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've heard us talk about how to run effective meetings, or if you've heard us reference Traction by Gino Wickman, the issues list is a critical thing that we reference over and over again. And I will say after 4 years of using an issues list, it is one of the things I can credit with being the most effective in terms of pushing our business forward. Because when you're thinking of the issue, it's a lot easier to just jot it down somewhere than try and solve it. Often we're tempted to try and solve it right away, but often it's not the time and place. And sometimes you just feel stumped and then you feel overwhelmed and then it's tempting to forget it. But just getting into the habit of putting issues down. So you're talking about something, you're like, okay, this is falling behind. Let's add it to the issues list. Or we ran into a challenge. Let's add it to the issues list. And having a set, separate, determined time to talk about those issues, you can prioritize them. So you're always focusing your energy on solving the most important issues, not just the most recent issues. And you can really take the time to dig into it at a point where your brain isn't overthinking it because you are mentally prepared to be dealing with issues. And you also often have other people's perspectives. So this is really, really critical. I recommend that you just populate this list and use it to write down everything you need to talk about, questions about the future, things that are off track, things that will take more than a minute to cover when you're going through the priority and action tracker. It's just really good to have a place to jot stuff down and then set time aside on a regular basis to prioritize and work through those issues. and invite your clients. Well, I guess this depends business to business, but often as clients are talking, I'm adding things to the issues list myself. So I'm writing them out, with the amount of detail I need, but they can also write stuff on the issues list as well if that's control you're comfortable giving them, so they feel like they're taking action.
Nice. And this one is, I would think, a little bit more of a straightforward one, but like, what does the overall timeline look like? How does that get set up?
Yeah, so this is just the bird's eye view versus the really specific priority and next action tracker, right? In the next action tracker, I'm often using the notes section to track, okay, these are the next things in order we're going to need to do to accomplish the goal. But it's a lot to also to look, you can't really look close up and bird's eye at the same time. So I just really like to use the overall timeline. And overall, I find the more you work with somebody, the more this tends to be built out, because as you work with somebody and you get used to kind of dealing with all the immediate issues, then you start to look at, okay, what's coming down the line a month from now, a quarter from now, a year ahead? Are there specific dates that you need to be aware of and plan around? We definitely, on many projects, many growth strategies, end up doing a separate and more in-depth content calendar. But once again, just keeping things as simple and straightforward as possible, a lot of the time that's not necessary. And you really just need a bulleted list about stuff that's coming down the line in the next few months so that you can be aware of it, plan around it, and also so that your client can know or your team can know where you're heading with these goals and actions. Maybe you do want to work in engagement, so maybe you have it on your timeline that you want to finish up visibility by the end of Q1 or by the end of March or et cetera, so you can start working on engagement goal and you can just visualize that. And likewise, just kind of touch on the idea wish list. We've talked about it quite a bit already, but this is, as you're going through everything else, this is just where you throw down literally every idea that comes into you or the client's head. So we already talked about this quite a bit, so I won't get into it too deep because I know we're short on time here. But as the idea and issues list kind of go hand in hand. And in fact, in order, I would keep them close together, because they're where you're jotting stuff down when you're going through. And this helps keep the rest of your meetings more productive. And also, when you're ready to focus on ideas or issues, they're all collected there.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. And then I guess, let's, because you did say we're short on time, let's quickly go through kind of the more optional, but still pretty cool components of a growth strategy.
Okay, so I'll just give one or two lines about each of these.
Yeah.
So
I know some of them we could obviously spend forever talking about marketing engines, for
Oh
example.
yeah, absolutely. Like these are all different components where even when we were working on them with the team, like we do multiple trainings and stuff. But finished actions list. So this, I'm a firm believer that if you want to breed success and good habits, you need to celebrate things that have been achieved. So when stuff has been finished, I love just copy and pasting it into a finished actions list. Keep energy boosted, show how far you've come. And let's face it, if someone's like, oh, I feel like we haven't made much traction or something like that, you can look at it, assuming everything's on track. You can look at it and be like, well, this is everything we've accomplished. Here's everywhere that we have yet to go. And it's really powerful. I really like it. The second one is some sort of process around a buyer journey or a value journey. So the value journey is a process that was coined by Ryan Deiss of Digital Marketer. We have used various versions of it, including his. Our strategists are all, I believe, either have been or in the process of being certified on using his officially. But basically, it's something that tracks what happens from first touch all the way through to, advocating and referring and all that kind of stuff, and shows it kind of like a game of snakes and ladders, each element, what happens and how people move up or how they slide back down. That's really cool, really amazing. Definitely something I suggest that everyone look into as a concept if you're not already familiar with it. Again, it can kind of be overkill in terms of getting quick wins for clients to go through the whole process right away, unless they have a lot of resources up front. We prefer a quick and dirtier version called a marketing engine, which is more about tracking visibility through to conversion. And I like to use that to rapidly iterate ideas and understand how kind of goals and tactics and stuff connect together. Either way, you need to be doing some sort of work, or rather, maybe not you need to be, but this will be so much more effective if you're doing some sort of work with the client to understand how each of these goals connect together. So it's all well and good to be working on visibility in a silo and engagement in a silo and conversion in a silo, but those things all need to work together. So some sort of visualization process that makes it clear for you and your client how those different elements connect together, I think is really critical for making it all come together. So this isn't something that we include on every single growth strategy from the beginning. This is something that we work on as we're working on a growth strategy. Some clients have all the details together to put one together up front, and it's a tool the strategist will use right away. Some clients are really just starting to get leads or something like that, and thinking about all the different parts of the process is just way too overwhelming for them up front. So that's why I have them here on the optional list. I definitely think these are concepts that, as a marketer, is critical to understand, because you can really set yourself apart from the competition and really generate true results, right? This whole process is about generating results. But that being said, I'm kind of hemming and hawing about whether it on its own is a critical part of a growth strategy. Certainly, if this is new to you, just working on those individual goals, I think it can start to create a lot of results and traction for your client. And this can be a bit more of a longer term thing. But if you are familiar with the concept and it's something you already do, then absolutely, when appropriate, do this upfront.
Yes, totally. So I know you kind of briefly mentioned rapid iteration. Is that something you want to expand upon? Because I just want to hear about it. Or is that something we should save for next week's episode?
Okay, so rapid iteration is kind of like a tool in your tool belt. Says, it's an iterative process is something I say a lot.
I've never heard you say that at all.
Yeah, basically, rapid iteration is a tool that it's a concept more than a process, in the sense that it is doing quick and dirty versions of something to see what is successful before pouring all of your resources in one direction. So that's why, for instance, I like the idea of a marketing engine. I find it a very useful tool because it only has 4 components as opposed to the 8 or 9 on a value journey process. I find that it's a lot easier to look at, okay, we're considering a few different strategies or a few different channels for marketing. Let's map them out and see, what they look like piece by piece, and do it a few different times quickly so we can pick one and move forward with it. Rapid iteration comes up a lot in like Facebook ads, for example, where you have, and in programming, where you have an idea, and so you just quickly build it out, quick and dirty, see how it works, troubleshoot it, see whether it's viable, and decide whether to move forward in it. So rapid iteration is a really good tool to have in your growth strategy, because you don't want to commit all your resources to a path until you know that it's going to generate the results that you want it to. So depending on what your specialty is, or what your service is, what problem you're trying to solve, what goal you're focusing on, what it is that you're rapidly iterating and how you do it can vary very, very wildly. But I do think that it's important to understand rapid iteration as a concept, just like the idea of a buyer journey, a marketing journey, value journey, etc., so that you can have it at the back of your mind and understanding, okay, we're going down this path. We're not 100% sure whether it's going to work. Let's do a little bit in that direction, track the data, see whether it's effective, and then decide whether we want to tweak it, dump it, move forward full steam, etc. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. And I feel, okay, I've said this like 3 times this episode already, but I'm like, this needs to be its own episode.
Hope you're writing it down.
Oh, I am. Don't worry. So we've basically covered in a reasonable amount of detail everything that goes into a growth strategy and what it's made up of. And you alluded to this at the beginning, but if that's a lot of information, you're having a hard time visualizing it, or you're like, oh, that sounds amazing, how do I put it together? We have some resources that we're pretty much just giving away that are amazing, that's already done for you. So maybe talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to the show notes page for this episode, so that's going to be anansicontent.com/podcast/038. Maybe let's just try that. This is kind of a side note that can be edited out, but maybe let's try that in the background and make sure that's correct, because I did not do that yet. But basically, if you go to the show notes page, we are going to have basically everything we can possibly equip you with. So you're probably just going to have to put in your email address or something, but we're going to include our blank template for growth strategy. So this is the literal template that we use in our own business with clients that we have worked on for months. And that is really, really cool. It's also a little bit scary to be sharing with you, but like I said, we want you to be successful. So we're going to be sharing the actual template we use, which you can make a copy of and fill in. We're going to be sharing our cheat sheet set, which breaks down the components, how to use them, etc. We're going to be including a guide reference video and an offer. So the first 10 people who sign up actually are going to qualify for a 30-minute Q&A or tutorial on either how to workshop your growth strategy, how to implement our process for it. Basically, whatever you want to fill that 30 minutes with, we are here at your disposal. I'm even going to be doing a few of these calls myself. I know, time with me. How special.
I'll just sign up for all of them and there won't be enough for anyone else.
No!
I want to Q&A you.
Thankfully, you already have the drop on my time. You get my time real easy. But anyway, so once again, that is www.anansicontent.com/podcast/039 for this episode. So we're going to be offering this for the next 2 episodes as well. But for today's episode, just go over there. You can bookmark it on your device right now. Come back to it. But we are going to be including template, cheat sheet, reference video, and a place to sign up for a free Q&A if you're one of the first people to grab this. So super, super exciting. As well, if you have questions, feel free to shoot them our way. You could sign up for the Q&A and do it on a one-on-one basis, or you can let us know on Facebook via email. Heck, you can call us up. We would love to hear your feedback on whether you're doing your growth strategy, what you call your version of it, whether there's a component here that we missed, whether there's a component that you think that should be in there that isn't, and kind of wonder why it isn't. And next week, we're going to be talking about implementing it all. So we're going to talk about these components, how to put them together into a process you can actually lead your clients to. Just like our foundation strategy process, this is fairly simple and straightforward. There's a first few initial steps, and then there's a cyclical aspect of it. And we're going to give you all the goods, people. So tune in next week. I'm really excited to break this down a little bit more.
I'm excited too. I've learned so much today.
Awesome.
I just love showing up to these because, I know normally you're the one who interviews me, but these ones I get to interview you and I get to ask you all the things I'm curious about, which is amazing.
Excellent. Well, we're hoping to dragoon Jazz into one of these next 2 episodes to give her perspective as well, since she is not only our chief of marketing and spearheading this for Anansi, but is the strategist who is the most experienced in executing these for our clients as well. So
Heck, she designed a bunch of it.
Yeah, she absolutely did. I basically went in and clarified it and turned it more into a, simplified process and polish it a bit. But a lot of this is her. And she really does amazing work in and outside Anansi. And her whole focus is impact and driving impact for organizations, both in India, where she currently lives, here in Canada, her home country, and just in our business and all just really, really incredible person. So we're hoping that we can make it work in terms of timing to have her in for one of the next few episodes. Either way, tune in. Implementing your growth strategy is up next. And after that, we're going to talk about implementing it in your agency and selling it. So not just how to do this for yourself or for clients, but how to actually offer it as a service and sell it to people, like what messaging to use, etc. Like I said, we're giving you all the goods. So super, super keen. Tune in next week. If you have any feedback, as always, let us know. We'd love to hear it. And as usual, I hope you have an amazing day. And in fact, I hope you create yourself an amazing day, because I believe you have that power.
And that does it for another amazing episode of the Say It Online podcast. Join us next week. And don't forget to like and subscribe, whether it's iTunes, whatever your favorite podcast player is. It is always, always appreciated. It really makes a difference for us. It helps us get this word out to more people. As always, this episode was brought to you by our sponsor and Say's own business, Anansi Content. If you're a digital agency owner and you're still wasting too much time chasing down content that maybe isn't even all that great, let's talk. We've spent years working on the best process for selling, planning, and delivering amazing conversion content for your client projects. Better yet, we moosh our process to yours so that your client and you have a seamless and amazing experience the entire time through. If you're interested, just go to our website. That's www.anansicontent.com. That's ANANSI content.com. And just click Let's Talk. I'd love to chat with you. Someone else on the team would also love to chat with you too. Hope you have an amazing rest of your day.